What's going on, guys? It's Nav here, and today we're going to be talking about something everybody asks me about, and it's how to buy pre-construction. Now, if you're new to the channel, my name is Nav, and I talk about personal finance, investing, entrepreneurship, and a whole lot more. So make sure you guys smash that subscribe button because I upload twice a week and you definitely don't want to miss out. Now I want to start off by explaining what exactly pre-construction investing is. And for me to easily explain this to you, it's pretty much buying the rights of a property before it's built, and this could be either a condo or a house. Now there are many advantages when buying pre-construction compared to resale, but the main two advantages here is that A, you don't need financing on the property until the project is complete, and B, this is a very hot niche for investors because by the time the project is complete, they are expecting to make a profit. Now in the city of Toronto, pre-construction has been very hot in the past 5 years due to the very low availability of land in the downtown core. Not only have we seen a tremendous boom in the downtown core, developments outside of the downtown core has also boomed because not everybody can afford to live downtown. Public transit in the suburbs can get you to the downtown core in less than 30 minutes. So just remember, guys, that a majority of the price tag that you're paying for a property is specifically based on location. Now, for simplicity purposes, we're going to be talking about pre-construction condos, but the fundamentals are the same when buying a pre-construction house. So let's get straight into it, guys. The first step is step 0, and the reason why I say step 0 is because this is the most important step when buying pre-construction, and it's actually the down payment. And the reason why this is step 0 is because most developers, and we're talking like 99% of developers, will require 20% down on the project. Now I don't want to scare you when it comes to this 20% down payment because builders actually give you a deposit structure which pretty much breaks down when you're going to owe them that 20%. It usually goes as 5% in 30 days, 5% in 180 days, 5% in maybe a year and a half, and 5% on occupancy. Now don't quote me on this because every developer will provide a very different deposit structure. So make sure you guys inquire with the specific developer and get the exact deposit structure that works for you. Now that we got step 0 out of the way, let's move on to step number 1, which is knowing your budget. Now your budget can be really important because this can justify where your property will be located as well as how large the living space will be. Now when you're looking for pre-construction and you want to simplify this process, I highly recommend working with a real estate agent. Trust me, guys, if you were to walk into a sales office, the staff at the sales office will not tell you if there's a better development happening right across the street. Instead, they're going to tell you about how amazing this project is, and they're going to give you the most biased opinion. Whereas if you were to work with a real estate agent, they're going to give you the most unbiased opinion, and they're going to work with your budget and make sure that your budget suits your location and your lifestyle. Now back to the budget portion when buying pre-construction, the reason why this is very important because A, it could affect your down payment, and B, it could affect your financing later on in the future when the project is complete. And the reason why I say this is because a budget of $500,000 could maybe get you a studio in downtown Toronto, but it could also get you a 1-bedroom condo in the city of Vaughan, which is 20 minutes northwest of downtown core. Your budget will also affect your initial down payment of 20%, meaning that if the unit is $500,000, then you'll require a $100,000 deposit, whereas if the unit is $700,000, then you'll be required to put down $160,000. Not only will it affect your down payment, but it will also affect your financing later on in the future. If you end up buying a property for $700,000 and you have the 20% down payment, but you can't get approved for financing later on in the future, then you will end up with some serious issues. Now, a couple things you're going to want to consider when you start picking a location is mainly convenience. Being close to schools, grocery stores, and one of the most important things is public transit. This can tremendously affect the resale value of the property later on in the future. Now, a strategy I highly recommend using is calculating price per square foot when comparing 2 or more projects. If you were to look at a unit that was 500 square foot and the price tag was $500,000, then you know that you're paying $1,000 per square foot. Whereas if the development right next door is charging $480,000 for 500 square foot, then you know that they're charging $960 a foot. This is the main strategy that you're going to want to use when investing in pre-construction. That way you know if you're getting a good deal or not. This brings us to step number 2, which is selecting the right unit. Now, depending on the view, the square footage, and the floor plan, there's also other things to consider when selecting the right unit. The first general concept when selecting a unit in a building is that every floor that you go up is an additional $1,000. This may vary again depending on the builder, but typically speaking, it is $1,000 for every floor you go higher. And to make this easier for you to understand, imagine a unit on the 20th floor for $500,000. If that exact same unit was available on the 40th floor, then it would be costing you $520,000. Not only you're going to want to consider the floor that you're going to be living on in the building, but your view can also justify the price of the property as well. Typically speaking, the south view is always the most expensive, and I guess it depends on where the building is in different cities around the world, but in Toronto specifically, as long as you have the south view, you always have the downtown skyline, and you most likely will have Lake Ontario as well. The north view is usually the cheapest because it's pretty boring and you have the suburbs and a bunch of nonsense to look at. And the east and the west view is typically in the mid-range because you can get a little bit of the north and the south view depending on the unit that you select. Another thing you want to consider is the sunlight that you want in your unit. If you select a unit on the east side of the building, then you're going to get the sunrise and no sunset in the evening. Whereas it'll be the complete opposite and you'll get the sunset on the west end of the building. So this is really just comes down to preference and whatever you think would best suit your lifestyle. I know for me, for example, I'm not a morning person and I'll probably miss the sunrise realistically speaking, but I would love to watch the sunset. So me personally, I would always go for the west end facing unit just for personal preference. Something else that you're also going to want to consider is, will my view be obstructed later on in the future? This is something you're always going to want to ask the developers and the staff that work at the building, and make sure you know what the city plans are later on in the future. The last thing you want is to get a nice, beautiful suite for your future home, and the next thing you know, there's going to be a construction site right next door building a 60-floor tower that will completely obliterate your view. Another question you're going to want to ask yourself when picking the right unit is, where is the garbage chute on the floor? This is something a lot of people actually miss, but having your unit right next to the garbage chute could be a little bit annoying at times. So maybe just consider that as well. And the last thing to consider when selecting the right unit is whether or not the unit has a balcony, a terrace, or maybe no balcony. Now, having a balcony or no balcony is quite self-explanatory, but one thing you want to consider is having a unit with a balcony always helps when it comes to resale later on in the future. Most units, depending on the building, are a lot more difficult to resell later on in the future if the unit does not offer a balcony. Now, for those of you who don't know what a terrace is, it's pretty much a much larger balcony, but doesn't have another balcony on top of it. Now, terraces are a great bonuses when it comes to condo living because not only you have much larger outdoor space, but you actually can barbecue on your balcony, which I like to barbecue, so it's kind of nice. Step number 3, ladies and gentlemen, is whether or not you're going to want to consider getting parking. Now, if you're buying a pre-construction house, this is obviously not a question you're going to need to ask yourself because houses always come with parking. But that's not always the case when it comes to condo shopping. Now, generally speaking, when you buy a pre-construction development in the heart of downtown Toronto, parking is never an option unless you can get a unit over 2 bedrooms. And if you are getting a unit that is 2 bedrooms or larger, then parking could still cost you north of $50,000. So this is really a question you're going to want to ask yourself very early in the stage, is whether or not you're going to need parking. Of course, if you're buying a pre-construction development out in the suburbs, then parking is usually either free or much cheaper than downtown pricing. And this is quite simple. Again, you're just going to want to ask yourself is whether or not you're going to need parking. If public transit or walking to work is an option, then you probably won't need parking. But one thing you do want to consider is that when you do purchase parking for your condo, it just adds on right to the value of the property. That being said, if you were to purchase a condo for $500,000 and the parking space you paid for is $50,000, then quite simply the condo is now worth $550,000. If you're buying a pre-construction unit that's hopefully going to be rented out later on in the future for rental income, then I don't ever recommend buying parking. The reason why is because there are so many tenants out there who don't need parking. And why would you spend an extra fortune to possibly generate an additional $50 to $100 of rental income more a month? It doesn't make any sense, guys. So just don't buy parking if you're buying pre-construction for a rental property. And this brings us to step number 4, is the maintenance for the building. Now, typically speaking, if the building offers more amenities, then you're most likely going to have a higher maintenance cost. So if the project that you're looking to invest in has an outdoor pool, an indoor pool with a yoga room and a 24-hour concierge and a lobby room and a party room and all the other goodies, then you're most likely going to be paying for the fraction of the cost, and that will be embedded within your maintenance costs. Another thing that will also be affecting your maintenance is you want to find out if your hydro and your gas and your water is also reflected within the maintenance. Of course, if all the utilities are going to be embedded in the maintenance costs, then your maintenance costs will be higher. So this is again something you're going to want to inquire with the builder and find out if they're going to be including the utilities within your maintenance cost or if they're going to be metered separately. And after inquiring about all the good stuff with the builder, the final step is finding out if the builder you're buying from is a reputable builder. The reason why is because if you don't buy from a reputable builder, it really could bite you right in the ass in the future. The last thing you want to do is invest in a project, and the next thing you know, 1 year later, the project's been canceled and the market has been booming and you just lost out on a bunch of profits. This can also avoid a lack of quality when building the project and a bunch of promises that they usually make but never ever provide. In order to know if the developer is reputable, I highly recommend going online and just doing some basic research and making sure that they've done numerous projects in the past that have been successful. And that pretty much wraps up our step-by-step process when investing in pre-construction. If you guys have any questions or any feedback for the audience, make sure you guys leave them in the comment section down below. Like I mentioned before, I always recommend working with a real estate agent when investing in pre-construction. That way you get the most unbiased advice. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I'll see you guys next time.